a vote that healthy, that overwhelming would obviously make a lot of senators think about their calculus. Because remember, a lot of the senators who are up for election, so they're going to be watching convict Donald Trump. I think that's incredibly important to note because the last time President Trump was impeached, he came out of the gates and said, "This is meritless, this is meaningless," and we all know how this is going to end. It was something along those lines. He's not saying that now. There is no defense. The defense is this is a rush process rather. We've not heard a single substantive, really, defense of what the president did, just trashing that we could have upwards of 10, as many as 20 Republicans vote to impeach Donald Trump, and then it goes over to the Senate.
Yeah, and we're up to 9 now, just so you know, Jake. We just, our calculation is we've got 9 Republicans crossing over. So those are the numbers we're watching, Lester.
Yeah, Eugene, I want to ask you about what the end game here is, especially for Republicans, and what Mitch McConnell had reportedly said in some of the reporting leading up today. Is part of this getting him out of the game, erasing him from the Republican calculation going forward?
Well, I think that's what Mitch McConnell would like to do, and I think that's what a lot of Republicans would like to do. But other Republicans either would not want to do that or don't think it's possible or are afraid to try. I mean, the assumption, I think, is that Donald Trump is likely to have a lot of influence over the Republican base one way or another, after he's out of office. And I think Mitch McConnell sees potentially the opportunity to really reduce that and to take the party back. I mean, Trump did conduct a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, and establishment Republicans would love to take it back. But the Mitch McConnell's and Liz Cheney of the party may not right now have the power to do that. That's going to be the great uncertainty for the party going forward.
All right, Eugene and Jake, thanks to both of you. I want to go back to Casey Hunt on Capitol Hill. She's not only watching this count along with us, but she may be ahead of it in terms of what we're hearing from some of the members. Casey, what's the latest?
Well, Lester, we are up to 9 Republican members of the House who have voted to impeach President Trump. The one surprise, Congressman Tom Bryce of South Carolina. We didn't have a statement from him ahead of his vote. And we should just remind everyone that as long as this vote's open, members of Congress can go in and change their votes. But his has stood at a yes, impeach the president for quite some time now. So we wanted to make sure that we got it onto our list. Otherwise, it's still that list that we have been talking about. Congressman Katko from New York was the first Republican to come out. He said last night he was going to vote to do this. You also have Fred Upton from Michigan, as you've been talking about extensively. Liz Cheney from Wyoming, who came out and said that this was a constitutional matter and that she was going to vote to impeach Donald Trump. Again, she is the number 3 elected Republican leader in the House. She is a very top-ranking official there, and of course the daughter of Dick Cheney, the former vice president. So a pretty significant stand for her. Some others, Peter Meijer is a freshman congressman from Michigan. He has come out a couple times in the last couple of days talking about just how difficult this week has been for other members, for his colleagues, and what they all have been facing personally in a way that's really made him stand out. This is, of course, just his first couple of weeks here in the House of Representatives. Adam Kinzinger of Illinois also voting for impeachment. We knew he was going to do that. He was the only Republican to support invoking the 25th Amendment, which, of course, they voted on late last night in the House. Otherwise, we've all been focused on impeachment. So we still have quite a few Republicans outstanding. As many as 80 have yet to vote. So we're still keeping a very close eye on this. As Jake said, the estimates we had going in here, I had heard between 6 and 12 initially. And then once Liz Cheney came out, there were some estimates that it could be higher than that. But it does seem like we're going to be in a little bit of a lower range here. And I think the question here is it enough to underscore the depth of anger at President Trump to get Republican senators to vote to convict him. And it's clear Mitch McConnell has said that he is open to that. He's also said he's not going to start any trial until at least January 19th. So that does give a period of time for people to reflect, to learn more perhaps about what happened. The reality here is that the more that we have learned about this attack, the more, frankly, terrifying it is. And the clearer it's become that we had a very, very narrow miss of something far, far worse, even as bad as we knew it was when it was unfolding on Wednesday. There's also the question of whether the president continues to incite his supporters or takes steps to try and calm the situation. They put out a written statement today that seemed to be in the calming direction, but we also know that the president often is at odds with his own aides. He had put out a statement on Wednesday, a video statement, that he later seemed to suggest he regretted doing it all if this transition of power is actually going to be peaceful ahead of the inauguration. I got to tell you, Lester, it's it's both reassuring and unsettling, I would say, to have come into this building and this morning to dozens of National Guard troops, people in military uniforms sleeping on the floors here in the Capitol. It's only happened a handful of times in our history since troops were quartered here in the Civil War. And I know everyone who's up here is grateful that they're here to prevent what happened on Wednesday. But also it's a pretty terrifying reminder that we are not out of the woods yet in terms of what may unfold both here in Washington and also in state capitals across the country. Lester.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine just a week ago, you and I sitting here describing the events as they transpired, many of them right outside those doors we're looking at right now. Casey, thanks. We'll go back as we watch the tally. You can see a number of members have not voted yet. Vaughn Hilliard on the streets of Washington now. He has a look at the security measures now in place that Casey was just talking about. Vaughn?
Lester, you guys were just talking about those National Guards members. We should note, I had a conversation with an official from the Department of Defense just today who tells me there are now more than 6,600 National Guardsmen on the scene here in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of them are behind me here. We should note just 1 week ago when, Lester, you and I spoke, all that was up, essentially keeping the general public away from the steps of the Capitol, was about a 4-foot little guard rail. What you see now today is a 7-foot fence here erected with hundreds of National Guardsmen helping Capitol Police here. But this is not the only layer. I want to give folks an idea of where we're at right now. We're here at the intersection of First Street and East Capitol. And as you go across the street, you'll see the U.S. Supreme Court, which is part of these Capitol grounds. But there's another fence, another 7-foot fence that extends the perimeter back another about 250 yards up to 2nd Street. And National Guardsmen as well as Capitol Police are also protecting that area there. I was talking to the Department of Defense official here who tells me the other significant news of the day is the fact that the Secretary of the Army approved National Guardsmen to be armed. That is where you saw here today for the first time individuals, these guardsmen, actually armed here around Washington, D.C. It's tough to get around anywhere from here, from the Capitol, all the way down to the White House now. We were here earlier when some cargo trucks were being loaded with M4 rifles and being taken here around the city. I mean, we should note, Lester, you've been around enough inaugurations. This is not typically what Washington, D.C. looks like a week before inauguration, but it's telling to know what is happening inside right now with these impeachment proceedings and the fact that there is this extensive of a perimeter a week before inauguration and while these impeachment proceedings are underway. Lester?
Yeah, Vaughn, and I had seen somebody had tweeted a little bit earlier a frame grab of an Apple map, and it showed all the closures in the D.C. area. How is the city, how is government even able to function right now under that kind of lockdown?
You know, we have to have our media badge to get to where our bureau is at, which is National Guardsmen, we should note, are not just here to aid law enforcement, but they're also here to help serve as medical support. They're here for traffic purposes, logistical support. Washington, D.C. is essentially shut down here over the course of this next week. You know, we should know yesterday, folks were still traveling down this roadway here, and the Department of Defense official telling me, yes, there are 6,600 National Guardsmen now. They expect that number to be ramped up all the way to 15,000 by next Wednesday.
All right, Von Hilliard, thank you for watching and bringing us that scene outside the Capitol. Let's go back to Savannah now.
Yeah, and Lester, joining me on the phone is Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, a Republican who compelled to cast this vote today. You also, I should mention, voted yesterday to have Vice President Pence invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office immediately, a vote that failed. Tell me about your vote, and are you worried, frankly, about paying a political price for it?
You know, I voted this way because if the president, the Article 2 branch of the Constitution inciting an insurrection against Article 1 is not impeachable, then we almost maybe should just throw away that whole process. This was, you know, an attack on American democracy. It's not just about the violence. This is about the message about American democracy, which is exactly the process we use to prevent violence in this country. So I think it was the right vote. Do I worry about my political future? Not really, because honestly, I never got into this to build some political empire. I did it to do the right thing, and I am in total peace today that my vote was the right thing, and I actually think history will judge it that way.
When you listen to the arguments of your Republican colleagues arguing against impeachment, there was a lot of talk about this being a very divisive vote, that this wouldn't unify the country. They talked about the process being rushed and that being unfair to the president. How do you respond to those arguments?
Well, you know, I don't want to question motives because everybody, of course, is a deeply tough decision. But bottom line is, yeah, it's rushed because we were rushed by a mob, and the president is president for the next 7 days, and we all lived it. You don't need to get further evidence when you were in the middle of it, and you have all this evidence that's videotaped. And in terms of division, it may. But the real thing, the real person that stoked the division in this country that led to what happened was the President of the United States. And so I think we have to. This is a vote that gets us, we have to get out of the comfort of making political decisions and turn into the fact that this is a oath-making, oath-keeping, historical books vote. And frankly, I want to be on the right side of history, and I want to feel peace that I followed through on the oath that I've taken in the military and as Congress.
As we've been chatting here, a 10th Republican has crossed the aisle and voted, along with the Democrats and with you, to impeach the president. But you said you don't want to question motives. Fair enough. But are you disappointed that more Republicans have not joined your view of things? I mean, there are 211 Republicans in the House. You're talking about a handful taking this action under pretty extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, I am disappointed. I mean, it's I think, quite honestly, a lot of the motivation to vote against this is fear. It's fear of politics, maybe the fear of safety. I can understand that fear, but the bottom line is this transcends that. I certainly wish there were more. There aren't, and that's okay. We will go forward. This process goes forward, but as a party and as a country, we have to have a real look inside and fix things because we cannot sustain politics like it's been happening.
I don't know how much you have your ear to the ground, but I'm sure you saw the signal that was sent pretty transparently from Mitch McConnell's office. There was a report in the New York Times that he was pleased the Democrats were pursuing impeachment. He has indicated now that he's open and will listen to the arguments. It's a huge change in posture versus, say, a year ago with the previous impeachment. What do you think might happen with your colleagues over on the Senate side? Do you think there's an actual chance that Republicans could cross over in the Senate and convict and remove the president?
I certainly do. And if you look at the day of the attacks on the Capitol, first off, there were, just a handful of people that were going to object. So they take that part of the job a little more seriously, I think, than some over on this side. And, that number was cut in half after the riots, which is sad that, in fact, there were still. But if you look at the House, there were still 130 people that objected to certification after the attempted insurrection. So I hope the Senate does the right thing. I think they will. I do, but all I know is I'm responsible for my vote. I feel at peace with my vote, but it was definitely a very weighty and heavy day in America.
And finally, I heard over and over again the argument on the Republican side. Hey, where was the outrage when there was looting and rioting on the streets this summer after protests over racial justice? That there was hypocrisy now and outrage when there wasn't outrage before. How do you see that argument?